Assalamu alaikum. I will finish by 15 minutes. And the rest of the time may be spent on question and answers. I will finish by 15 minutes. Thank you. The brother reminded me and likes me how we are actually endangered species. We, the Muslims, who are thinking of looking at Islam from another perspective. We are abandoned from that side and we are abandoned from this side as well. But still, in that darkness, some candles will glow, like this conference. Thank you very much, Banafshi and Austin. Any sane person, sorry, when I don't smoke for a long time, it happens. Any sane person in the world will understand and realize that with all those religions around, secularism is not a choice anymore. It is the only way to go. Actually, all the religions and followers of the religions, and including followers of many sects of Islam, admitted it practically, except one. A very powerful, very strategic, and with the strength of 1 million tsunamis, it alone stands very tall against separation of church and state. We can call it, other speakers called it, political Islam. What is political Islam? Political Islam is the brand of Islam, the followers of which believe that creating global Sharia-based Islamic law is a part and parcel of Islam. That was the mission of all the prophets, and that is the command of God on them. Now it's very difficult to undo a perceived command of God. How political Islam's institution look at secular democracy? Let me get the answer from its founding father, modern founding father, Maulana Maududi, 1941. His book, A Short History of Revivalist Movement in Islam. He says, in this Islamic government system, there is not much room for a person to exercise his free will, unquote. Second quote from his book, Islamic Law and Constitution. From political point of view, the theory of Islamic State is the very antithesis of Western secular democracy. So probably now you get a picture how they look at separation of church and state. And at the end he says, in Jihad in Islam, page 6, Islam wants to destroy all other governments from the face of this planet, unquote. In page 24, quote, if Islamic government has adequate resources, it will destroy all other governments of the world, unquote. So that is a declaration of an informal war against all of you, against all the non-Muslims of the world. Now his voice sounds and resounds after all these 60 years, from Trinidad to Toronto, from Australia to whatever. They have created millions of followers by abundant flow of petrodollars, creating institutions 50 years ago that produced piranhas batches by batches. Somebody was telling why rich and educated Muslim of the West can support such a philosophy. Well, you have brought a Trojan horse here. In the immigration form, there is not a question, do you believe in secular democracy? It's not there. I have given this petition to one of our top leaders, didn't vote. Well, do you know who funded these Sunday Islamic schools? Saudi. Do you know what syllabus is taught there? So you allowed to grow in your soil a system which knows very well how to take advantage of your system to destroy your system. The point is, the political Islamists are very cunning. Let me tell you, don't get me wrong, you are kids in front of them. You are so naive. They have succeeded in controlling Muslim world recently. Let me go back. When Muslim world got independence from colonialism, Nasser of Egypt, Jinnah of Pakistan, Mossadegh of Iran, Sukarno of Indonesia, very important Muslim worlds, all were out and out secular. After 50 years today, the victory of political Islam is almost complete from Morocco to Indonesia, except 4 places: Morocco, Tunisia, Senegal, and Tatarstan. Mr. Sharia Kobi did a marvelous job on Tatarstan. So now it's time to focus on the West. Less than 5%, less than 3% Muslim population made their presence so well that the parliament has to think twice to do anything which touches Muslims. They have succeeded in getting accepted elements of Sharia law in Germany and in Britain. I will elaborate later in question and answer session if time permits. But their success reached pinnacle, the highest peak in Toronto. There was a Canadian Sharia court. Irshad Manji touched it, but he was short of time, so he was very brief. The Sharia court started in 1991 with the blessing of Canadian law. It was not an informal institution. It was a formally, legally allowed, valid Sharia court in Ontario. In 2003, it applied to the government for the arbitration status so that their verdict cannot be challenged in Canadian court. That is the time when Canadian Council of Muslim Women, a very small but vibrant organization, Muslim Canadian Congress, which I happen to be the director of Sharia, and an international campaign against Canadian Sharia Court 3, jumped in action. 3 years of unbelievable struggle. We all lost our weights. And last year, government passed another law, repealing that law of 1991. So, the Sharia Court was banned. It's no more there. From here, we have to learn a lesson. Political Islam can be opposed effectively by non-political Muslims. How? Because Muslim scholars of non-political Islam has identified how Islam has been corrupt to fit into political interest and patriarchy before 1400 years ago. So once it's identified, we know the antidotes, what to do to inform common people, illiterate but honest, ignorant but simple Muslim mass from Morocco to Indonesia. That's what we are doing. This is a video, the debate on Sharia with a Maulana. This is a drama of love and tears and laughter, but on Sharia. Somebody is making a movie on it, and real documents are here. Hanafi law book, Shafi law book, Sahih Bukhari of Madinah University, the Quran. So people will see the books and characters read from the Sharia books, and they know how much anti-women and anti-Quranic, anti-non-Muslim, anti-humanity, illogical, ridiculous laws Sharia contain. This is another one. Now, these things take money. If you ask me, okay, how much you need for your next project? $3,000, I'm giving you $3,000. You know what? I don't have money, but I cannot take. Why? The moment they will know, and they will know, that I have taken the money from an American non-Muslim, it will be proven as a conspiracy against Islam. So this type of very fine struggles we are doing. I have written books, Islam and Sharia in Bangladesh, and my another book, Threat of Political Islam, is coming up in English, and other DVDs as well. Before I stop, I repeat the point that from the Quran, it is possible to make a dynamics, a mechanism of supporting separation of church and state. You may be surprised. Let me give you at least one example, otherwise you will be lost in dark. The Quran identifies itself in 7 places, absolutely in clear terms, as a book of guidance, a book of Munir, Nur, a book of light, a book of warning, and a book of good news. Nowhere in the Quran there is even a remote verse identifying the Quran as a law book. Actually, if you go to Encyclopedia Britannica 1983, you will see Imam Bukhari, the next person of the Prophet, Sahih Bukhari is the next to Quran. He said that the Quran is not a book of law. The moment he said, the Khalif sent him to exile, didn't allow him to talk to people anymore, and he died there in Samarkand. So, Sharia is a product of political conspiracy and patriarchy. So we see lots of hate against non-Muslims and against women. It is possible to show these dynamics to people, common people, so that they will realize the conspiracy, they will realize how Islam actually is possible to create it, not to create, it's already created, but it never got propagated, that from Islam, it is possible to support separation of church and state. To record these documents, we invited the Shariaists again and again and again. They don't come. They promise to come on the spot. We arrange everything, TV camera and recording. They don't show up. Again and again, at least 10 times. This is the only one this Maulana came to me. He never came back. Anyway, I should stop now. All right, let me touch the point of absence of political Islam in Shiaism. Actually, that's not true. When Abbasides uprooted the Umayyad Khilafat by a bloodshed genocide in 750, with the help of Shia imams, the Abbasid started killing the Shias in mass. So we see a rebel Shiite Khalif called Fatimid Khilafat in Morocco, Tunisia. Later they moved to Egypt. And actually this Shiite Fatimid Khilafat is the one who established Al-Azhar University, which is the nerve center of Islamic education today, with lots of violence in their syllabus. Let me tell you, Al-Azhar University syllabus, Saudi University syllabus, Pakistan school syllabus has lots of hatred against all of you. The chief educationist, Dr. Rizwan, Dr. Fawzan of Saudi, his books are taught in your country, in schools founded by Saudi money. There are other points. You will make a blunder if you take Sharia as a law book. Sharia is not a benign law book. Sharia is the malignant inspiration of creating Islamic State. So to defeat Islam, a beautiful and effective way to undermine or prove that Sharia is actually anti-humanity, that's a perfect way to go, and it works with common people. If we can undo Sharia, political Islam is automatically undone. There are mechanisms developed by our scholars how to do that. Like the very fine work was done by Mahmoud Taha of Sudan. His book, The Second Message of Islam, shows clearly how Islam not only permits, but actually supports separation of church and state. And political Islam is actually violating Islam, and what are the conspiracies? So what happened? He was hanged in 1985. He was, I believe, 72 or 73. So our voice People like us were always killed, harassed. It's part of our life today. But we do it. I will really stop now with one sentence, one thing. I get hate calls, as we all do, part of my life, that once I really got a heavy one, serious one, very serious one. You can't even imagine. So what I did the right thing. I asked the person who has a right on my life, my wife. I told her, what should I do now? And it was real. The threat was real. My bloodshed was obligatory. My wife and my property and my children were to be hostage, and etc. You know what she said? She said, if you think you are doing the right thing, never submit to threats. And I thank her so much for that.
You know, I have to say that I've never much worried about the threats that arrived. The ones that always bothered me and frightened me were the ones that didn't arrive. Because I figured that the ones who arrived were going to be satisfied by, as they saw it, terrifying me. And in fact, in all the years that we've been receiving nasty telephone calls and death threats, which are now countless, the threats, not the years, and I mean, none of them's ever showed up. And our response to them has always been the same, which is, you know, now is a good time. What are you waiting for? We are all here. Come and get it. Just, you know, two things. We have weapons, and there's a very big dog. Watch out for the dog. And we haven't seen anybody. So, you know, probably it's the dog. If they only knew what this dog is actually like, that he would, for a bone, take them happily to wherever we were asleep. But anyway, he's big and noisy. So anyway, now, Salome, can you, Salome, can you lead us through this thicket now? And come out the other side, which is the successful resolution of mosque and state.
Thank you very much. And thank you for attending and staying awake, most importantly.
Talk into the microphone.
Okay. Thank you very much for attending. I'd like to, you know, tackle this issue from a different perspective. I'd like to make the point that where we are today is not something that we have to surrender to accepting as permanent. In my view, that the current trend in political Islam is not irreversible. If we consider the fact that Islam has been around for 1400 years, we do need to ask the question, how come we didn't have a problem for most of the 1400 years with something called political Islam or fanatical ideologues who want to go and kill others in the name of the cause? When did this really emerge, this business of terrorism in the name of Islam? 30 years? 40 years? 50 years? In its modern form, terrorism as we know it today is very, very new in the sense that we didn't suffer such problems before. Arab and Muslim societies have accepted to a large extent the developed Western world's concepts of secularism, in a sense, and the clerics and the mullahs were not ruling in most of the Arab and Islamic worlds. Now, just to give a bit of background, I will not go as far back as the Crusades over 1,000 years ago, But I'd like to go back to Western colonialism in our part of the world, namely British and French. Initially, these colonialist powers came into the region and they established in a positive way these concept of accountability to an elected government. It introduced democracies in some of the countries in the region. I'm not talking about the tribal country, Gulf states. I'm talking more about the Near East countries, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. So in a sense, we did have a coexistence of Islam and Muslims with democracy and secularism. Up until the 50s, in the region, we did have not a perfect democratic experiment in the region, but a democratic experiment nevertheless, very secular. The Muslim Brotherhood was established in 1946, although the founder was basically propagating the argument earlier, a few years earlier. And the Muslim Brotherhood, I take examples in Egypt and Jordan, because I know them more, and Iraq. They were very much isolated. They did not catch up. The public opinion did not buy into their argument. What was happening at the same time in that period, the 50s and the 60s, was the West and the United States included were fighting against the biggest threat of the time. And at the time, people thought it was an endless threat, which is the threat of communism. And in the name of fighting communism, it was convenient for the West, including the United States, to back regimes in the Muslim and the Arab world, to back them, to support them in co-opting and cooperating and empowering the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamists, because they're natural enemies of the communists. In other words, the West encouraged secular regimes in the region to bring on board the Islamists as a power to counter the Soviet threat represented by communism as the biggest threat of the day. This is the first time when we started seeing talk about Islamic Sharia and Islamic rule in Arab and Muslim societies. It existed before, but it was isolated, very much limited. Now, this is not, I'm not saying this is the only factor that brought us where we are today. And this is not a justification as much as it is an explanation. Before that, the colonialist powers had installed families, literally families, as leaders when they left the region. These families did not make themselves accountable to the people. They were corrupt, and they were oppressive. And the seculars, in a sense, ruled the Arab world for about 80 years. Many of them are still ruling because their children and their grandchildren take over from their fathers and grandfathers. The Islamist trend as a political Islam emerged really in the 70s. The late 70s, the Khomeini example inspired many on the Sunni side. And the Palestinian struggle for independence gained some kind of, and at the time when, before it turned into terrorism targeting innocent civilians, it did at one stage, where the Palestinian struggle romanticized, quote-unquote, jihad for the Islamists who followed later. Of course, here I'm not condemning all the Palestinian liberation movement, but I am condemning those who took that movement to this kind of violence that targets innocents. And of course, here I'm not justifying anybody's action. I'm condemning any act of violence targeting civilians, regardless who's doing the attacking and who's the victim. And this is very important to point out. Now, a combination of pan-Islamists fighting communism, secular regimes failing their people, and of course these secular regimes always oppressed secular dissent because they knew that they were the only acceptable alternative as far as Western powers were concerned. And the Islamists, as they were rising as an alternative to the secular, corrupt, oppressive regimes, they benefited from the fact that these regimes did not allow their real enemies, the secular reformers, from presenting themselves as an alternative. So there was a conspiracy and an unholy alliance between so-called pan-Arab regimes and the Islamists to crush the secular reformers who were dissenting against both the corrupt regimes and the Islamists. This continues until this very day. In other words, if you go to Egypt, you know, no regime in the region is going to shut down the mosques, obviously, because you will be depicted as someone who's trying to shut down God on earth. So it is only natural when these regimes, backed by the West, we shouldn't forget, these people were either installed by the West before the colonialists left, or backed by the West after they came to power in coups, in military coups, with no elections being held. So we have a situation where the mainstream Islamists, at first, you know, they played the game. They went and said, we will accept democracy as a means of gaining power. So the mainstream Muslim Brotherhood, for example, whose ideology is non-violence, they do not want to go into a confrontation, a bloody confrontation with the secular regimes backed by the West. They argued that we will win by default as these corrupt regimes continue to be exposed as we go along. It so happened that certain elements within the Muslim Brotherhood thought this was they were waiting too long, and that they will never actually be allowed by these regimes or the West to gain power, and they went underground, and they became a militant movement, which, in my view, is the core of what later became known as Al-Qaeda. Now, the sad thing, as it stands, is that the fact that most victims of violence committed by individuals and groups who call themselves Muslims are actually Muslims. The victims are Muslims. 95% probably of the victims of terrorism in the world today, Islamic terrorism or terrorism in the name of Islam, are fellow Muslims. In Iraq today, it reached a point where we had 100 Iraqis killed every day, Muslims killed by fellow Muslims. This is not a religious problem in my view. The whole phenomena of terrorism, Islamic fanatical radical movements, this is a product of a political failure on all sides, on the Western side as well as on the side of these governments that ruled without any accountability, oppressing their own people. And I'm talking about the Middle East mainly, Middle East, the Gulf, North Africa. The question of coexistence between Islam and democracy, for me, is unacceptable when people actually raise this issue. Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world. It is a democracy. Malaysia is an Islamic country, predominantly Muslim. And they do have democracy. Sure, they are sensitive in the social, cultural sense to Islamic issues, but they are a democracy. They elect their leaders. Their leaders are held accountable. They do have freedom of the press, freedom of expression. So this is not an Islamic problem. This is not a religious problem. This is a political problem that has taken on an Islamic face, if you like, because the perpetrators of these crimes are saying that they're doing it in the name of God. Now, the question is, why do these people gain popularity? How come they are perceived as romantic Islamic versions of Che Guevara in many parts of the Arab and Muslim world? And the reason, again, lies partly in the mainstream Arab media portraying these people as sort of legitimate jihadis. And they argue that the West, killed us when the colonialists were ruling us. The West continues to kill us by supporting the Israelis against the Palestinians. They continue to kill us in Iraq. They kill us wherever they can. So if they attack our civilians, why shouldn't we attack theirs? This is their argument. Of course, they don't make the distinction here that in the course of war, it's a big difference whether you're deliberately targeting civilians or whether civilians are falling in the context of war without you intending to target them. This distinction is not made in the Arab media as we know it today. Of course, when I'm saying I'm generalizing, there are exceptions. There are people who are doing or trying to do a good job. But this mainstream media is owned by Arab governments, the same Arab governments that I'm talking about, the corrupt, oppressive Arab governments. And it's in their interest to have the so-called jihadists, Islamic jihadists, focused on a war outside the borders of their territory, so as not to turn against them. And because they know they're guilty of being oppressive and corrupt, they're willing in some cases to throw money at the problem. Give the Islamists money. It's like the mafia thing, you pay the mafia so that it won't attack you. And it works. It has worked so far. But, of course, it is beginning to backfire. Once these jihadists find that it is not possible to change the West by a few spectacular attacks here and there, they're going to go back to their original plan, which is taking power in the Arab and Islamic world. In other words, when they attacked on 9/11, their strategy was, the Americans won't leave us alone. They continue to back these corrupt, oppressive regimes. We want to hit them in the heart of their, quarters in New York so that they'll get the message. Leave us alone. Stop backing these regimes because we think we will win, we'll take over power if you stop supporting them. Of course, it's not untrue that the West has been supporting these regimes, providing them with weapons, means of oppression, intelligence, surveillance, eavesdropping devices, etc., all these trappings of technology that these regimes are using to keep dissent at bay, to crush opposition, and to continue to rule without any accountability. Now, it was very nice that this US administration decided to launch this project to spread democracy in the Arab world. But while the administration was generous on the rhetoric side, it has done very little to show its seriousness, at least to convince most people who are very skeptical of US intentions, simply because of the historical Western involvement in that part of the world that has been mainly negative. Not only that, but the administration, while talking about the need for democratization, it was still offering support to the regimes that you would think will no longer be there if you'd had democracy. The only reason why these leaders do not hold elections is because they know they won't win them. And so this brings us back to Iraq, which is the focus, in my view, of this massive confrontation. Not only, this is not a confrontation between Shiites and Sunnis, with the Americans once standing on the sides of the Sunnis and then on the Shiites and then turning to try to accommodate the Sunnis, which is a big political blunder, in my view. It shows lack of strategy. In the late 70s, it was the Shiite Muslims who were the bad guys. Today, after 9/11, it's the Sunni Muslims who are the bad guys. The Shiites are okay. You see, Sistani called for elections in Iraq, and he was on board, and most of the Shiites of Iraq were on board with the American project, which is true. And then, but the Shiites of Iran are not the Shiites of Iraq. And the Shiites of Iraq, once they saw the Americans and others are trying to accommodate the Sunnis at the expense of the majority, they went further, closer to Iran because they needed some kind of protection. What I'm trying to say is that the U.S. should stop this policy. Now we're with the Sunnis and then we're with the Shiites. Because it should have a strategy, a political strategy that has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with global security considerations, national, strategic interests, and preferably doing the right thing. When you talk about spreading democracy, you cannot be selective and say, I want to pressure Syria and Iran on the democracy issue because they are on the wrong side. But I don't want to say anything about our friends, who are even probably worse than the Syrians and the Iranians in terms of how they treat their own people. Though it's very hard to imagine if, something worse than the Syrians. Finally, I'd like to conclude by saying that what we have today is not a religious war. There are people who are carrying the banner of religion to justify what they're doing. These are a minority. Their biggest victims are the rest of the Muslims, first, before they are the rest of the world and global security. You can no longer fight this war the traditional way, obviously, and there needs to be new thinking. And the new thinking has to focus on how do you delegitimize and demystify the so-called jihad, which is basically criminal terrorism in my view. How do you, instead of glorifying it as Al Jazeera would like to do, and has successfully done so, contributing to recruits for Al-Qaeda, I think there needs to be a serious look at the Arab media. Governments have to reconsider their media basically propagating murder as jihad, murder as resistance, as we've seen in the case of Iraq, or Palestine and Israel. And this is the only way to stop the recruits first and to diminish the appeal of such criminal groups as we have today. The responsibility is primarily, I think, on the Arab and Muslim side, but I think the West should start considering that it cannot be against terrorism and at the same time accommodate those who continue to support it. Thank you very much.